Today's video is brought to you by Assiniboia Downs Gaming and Event Center. And be sure to tune in to Trust the Profits Live Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern for Monday Night Lights, hosted by Matthew DeSantis.
Salutations and welcome, friends. I'm your host to this episode of Trust the Profits. My name is Matthew DeSantis. You can find me on Twitter at the handle @FailedToMenace. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to this all-stakes Pick 4 preview taking place this Saturday at Thistledown, highlighted, of course, in the final leg of that Pick 4 with the Grade 3 Ohio Derby, which marks the return of the Kentucky Derby runner-up to Phil's, in addition to some other really exciting horses. Now, before we get into that preview, along with my very special guest, just a quick reminder, press that subscribe button here on YouTube to get all of our great content on Trust the Profits, whether it is the live streams that we have on Monday night at Assiniboia Downs or Thursday night at Woodbine, whether it's handicapping shows like this one, whether it's horse racing news shows like the Win Play Show, or maybe even a live stream on Saturday morning over on the other side of the pond with Royal Ascot. We might have to have some mimosas, have a little bit of breakfast, and start doing some live streams. We got you covered with whatever you're looking for here in horse racing. So like I said, press that subscribe button. Like this video as well, and comment below with what your Pick 4 ticket is, or maybe if there's a single or a favorite that you want to particularly fade in the sequence, let us know. Would love to hear it. If you're feeling generous, feel free to give out your own Pick 4 ticket as well. All right. Well, like I said, it's an all-stakes Pick 4. Two of them are state-restricted stakes races, kicking things off in the 9th and 10th race. And then there's some really intriguing horses, I think, all throughout the sequence, but some really big-name horses that I think even the casual racing fan will know in races 11 and 12. Here to join me today is a very special guest of mine, Spencer Luginbuhl. And Spencer, you are doing so much over at In the Money Media. You got the Red Board Rewind, which I'm always very thankful when you ask me to come on. It's always a lot of fun. And I would tell people, if you're not familiar with Red Word Rewind, go and check it out, because it's something that I think, especially for players who are just starting, it's such a helpful thing to do, which is to reflect on what happened the week before and to reflect on the races that took place and learn from, if you made a mistake, to learn from it and to think about the process that led you to, the tickets that you put in, et cetera. So really appreciate you coming on and hanging out with me and talking about this sequence.
Super excited to be on, man. Thank you so much for the invite. And yeah, I mean, Redboard Rewind, man, what a weird thing coming up on episode 200. Just, I felt like was kind of a niche in the business where we talk Pick 4 sequences, we talk stakes races. Nobody talks about that maiden claiming race where the horse won with a 44 buyer. And I think for every single race, it's not like there's one race where there's no money being bet. So being able to reflect and look back at races, I almost am more excited to when the buyers come out at night to see, oh, what did I miss? Did this horse improve like I did? Then I am handicapping. And maybe that's because I've been handicapping for so long. And now this is more of the newer side of it, being able to reflect and do that show. But like I said, super excited to be on. Super excited for Thistledown, man. Not a track that I usually follow, but nice little Pick 4 sequence here for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not a track that I cover very much either, but on a big day like this, I always like to give a little shine to those smaller tracks, those secondary tracks that have their big days, and let them have a little bit of shine. We cover Belmont plenty. We're going to be covering Saratoga all summer, Del Mar as well. So they're going to get plenty of love here. But in the interim, hey, Thistledown, why not? Now, a lot of times when we do these types of previews for pick sequences, we're talking about Pick 5s. And a lot of times with Pick 5s, we always go, well, where's your single, to keep the cost of the ticket down, et cetera. Pick 4s are a little bit different. And I'm just curious, do you have a general strategy for constructing Pick 4s? Do you have a kind of a minimum maximum that you usually try to shoot for in terms of cost or in terms of number of horses you include in each leg? Just interested in your thoughts on that.
I think the goal is always try to find a single, but I think what has hurt me and just other players that I talk to a lot is it's not try. They must find a single, and then they rush and they try to find that one race where, okay, I have to single here. And then lo and behold, maybe their second or third choice actually wins. And they did have enough for the ticket, but they're trying to be, they're trying to skimp here to make sure they had enough horses in other places. And for me, it's not so much of a min max. My goal I've always tried to do is I want to find a horse that I want to place at least one win bet on throughout the sequence that becomes kind of my pseudo single. If I hit that horse, but I miss the rest, or I go 3 out of 4. Oh, cool. My ticket got paid for.
Right.
That's the way I look at it. So it's not so much of, obviously I tell people if you can't afford the ticket, don't play the sequence.
Right.
Or if you can't afford the sequence, just go one lower, play a pick 3,
Right.
play 2 doubles. Because guess what? I've done this plenty of times where I either miss the pick 4 completely, but maybe I hit that first double and I still end up making okay money.
Yep.
For me, it's like I said, it's not so much min max. I try to really hammer home specific spots, and if I like to pick 5 and I can find 1 or 2 singles, that's fine. I didn't find any singles really in this. Kind of race 10 will be my pseudo idea single, but yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a much more, like we talk on my show all the time, I like to do win dutching. I like to play exactas because to me, if I'm having trouble picking the winner of the race, why am I going to now try and pick 4 horses? That's kind of, what's the thing for insanity? Just doing the same thing over and over again, which most horse players do anyway. But I try to refrain from that as much as possible.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great advice, and certainly, I do not go out of my way to find singles in a pick 4 sequence. If I find one, great. It might allow me to spread a little bit more in some other races, but it's not something that I seek out necessarily. And a lot of times you can still put together, I think, a very economical ticket and a very effective ticket that still incorporates prices without having to single in that pick 4, which is why I like pick 4s as a general bet. So it's a lot of fun. And it's not just after you get busted out of the pick 5 that you just, you run it back. But let's dive into this sequence, and we'll kick things off in race number 9, which is the Cleveland Gold Cup Stakes, going 1 1/8 miles for 3-year-olds, and this is for state breds. It's an 8-horse field, and Spencer, I'll let you as the guest kind of kick things off. Where did your eye go in this race? Obviously, the morning line favorite is Trojan Tail, the number 6 for Mike Maker with Farron Peterson aboard. This felt to me like a horse that could be vulnerable, and I was trying to find value somewhere else, but interested in your thoughts on this one.
I definitely feel the same way. And in this race, if you look at Trojan Tail, that race 2 back, that race kind of fits out nicely there with a 74 getting that nice win. It seems like a lot of horses on this late pick 4 all of a sudden ended up in a turf stake race. It seems the next race out. I went 3 deep in here trying to beat. We're going to talk about my number 1 pick, number 2, Fair and Square, Sanchez aboard for Timothy Ham at that nice 20% clip so far. I just like this one, the fact back-to-back 70s, not counting that last turf stake. And this one seems to be going in the right direction. 2 for 2 at Thistle. Listen, when I'm playing these lower level tracks and the horses are winning over the circuit, I kind of give the horse extra, motivation that I know they can at least get the job done here, whether or not we have these big time shippers coming in. I thought the number 3, Paint the Town, another one that was interesting. Again, scratch out that turf stake race, but this one's improving. 59, 62, 73. Now has to stretch out to 1 mile and 1/8. But a nice stat there for Robert Gorham, 25% with a positive $2 ROI going turf to dirt. So maybe that race to me seems like it wasn't so much as a setup to go back to the dirt as more just what ended up happening in the calendar. But it's always nice to have that stat when they're going back to the brown stuff. Last horse I just wanted to include, I don't want to get beat by this one early. Mike Maker for me is the guy that I either pick the entire card, which I seem to have done today, or I leave off completely and he beats me anyway. Hey Eugene, Jareth Loveberry. The race at Oaklawn just kind of fits over the rest of the field here, was the favorite that day. But also that maiden race 2 back of 71 kind of fits over the rest of the field as well. This one has 2 races in the 70s where everyone kind of has 1. So I want to also include that one. So I'm 253 to start off this pick 4.
Yeah, we see this one pretty similarly. My issue with the favorite Trojan Tail, who's a perfectly nice horse, and certainly that race 2 back at Belterra Park was a nice effort. My concern with this one is if you look, when this horse wins, it has a very specific way of winning, which is to sit second and basically sit right off the flank of the lead horse. And I don't think it's going to get that trip in this day because it's not quite fast enough, I don't think, to get up there. There's some other horses a little bit faster, and this horse hasn't really demonstrated the ability to pass a lot of other horses in that regard. So when it doesn't get things exactly right, the wheels kind of come off a little bit. And at 5 to 2, I'm not willing to take that shot. Like you, I also like the 3 quite a bit. Paint the Town. Again, toss the last effort. And what you see is a young horse with ascending speed figure since coming back from that layoff. And I think that when you dive into the pedigree a little bit, this is a horse that, should be able to handle the mile and an 1/8 distance. And, the pedigree suggests that you'll be able to do okay there. I also don't want to get beat by lone speed and by, especially depending on how the track is playing. And so, Hey Eugene, the number 5, was absolutely a horse that I included in my ticket as well, 4 to 1 on the morning line. Just a very quick note, in that debut effort, at Oaklawn Park in that restricted race, went up against a horse, Rivet, who we actually see came back and was a grade 3 winning sprinter. So really went against excellent competition sprinting at Oaklawn, came back. The third place horse in his debut or in his maiden win comes back to win next time out as well. So he has run against some nice horses during that time at Oaklawn. Like I said, toss out the turf form just like I did on the other horse. And I think you see a horse that really fits in this spot and might just be able to get it loose on the front end, but has some versatility, as we saw in that debut effort, has been working out well too. The other horse that I will include that you didn't mention, and I see where you're going with the 2, and I probably will regret leaving the 2 off my ticket. But I'm not entirely sure the 2 is going to be able to get the distance, because one of the other things we should mention is a lot of these horses are 6.5 furlong sprinters who are stretching out to 9 furlongs for the first time, or they got that one race over the turf at a mile and 16th. That seemed to be more for conditioning in a lot of cases. But the horse that I'm going to include, take a little bit of a shot with, is the number 4, Return on Investment, 9-2 for Jeff Greenhill, with Yana Vilas aboard. And this is one that, when you go back and look at that debut run at Indiana, was a disastrous start. The horse was just banged around something fierce coming out of the gate and was pinched a couple of times and really manhandled, and then eventually still kind of kept on in a 10-horse field past almost everybody else and finished third. The top 2 pulled away from everybody else, but the fact that this horse was able to finish, I thought, relatively well respective to the rest of the field was impressive. Then this horse goes to turf 2 times in a row, actually runs a pretty decent race in that green carpet last time out. And I think this horse, you get back on the dirt, which I think where it wants to go, the pedigree would suggest that going on the dirt long is not going to be an issue at all. So I'm going to include the 4. So in this one, I'll go 3, 4, 5 actually in my sequence, but I think we're both going to try to get by the favorite there in that one. So let's move on to leg number 2, which is the George Lewis Memorial Stakes. And this is a 10-horse field, and we're going a mile and a 16th for 3-year-olds and up. And again, a state restricted race. This is one where I had a little bit of a harder time getting by the favorite. Big Truck, the number 8 for Larry Smith, I thought looked like a pretty legitimate horse and a pretty legitimate favorite to include. But going back to our earlier conversation, wasn't like I was that enthralled with Big Truck that I wanted to single this horse here. So while I am going to be including him on my sequence, I'm not going to be, making sure that he's going to be my only one. I'm going to make sure to use some other horses around him. One of the horses that is interesting to me, and I'm not going to be included, but I want to bring up, is the number 3, Mobile Solution. This is a horse that won this race last year and has some really good races in the past. I'm worried, though, that this horse is starting to be on the downhill decline a little bit. 8 years old, might just start getting a little bit older. The speed fingers have been trending down. Even though second back from the layoff, that first time was really slow compared to what this horse has run off the layoff before. And so even though that's a horse that, like I said, has some nice races in the past, I'm probably not going to use. Ultimately, though, my 3 in this race, and I went 3 deep in this one, were the 5, 6, and 8. So the 5 venture on, 8-1. This is a horse that's a little bit of a new shooter in this area, but is 2 for 3 in the exacta at this distance and has never missed the board at Thistledown. Does have a win over the surface just last time out, going a mile and a 16th. So I think this is a horse that can certainly build on that performance. Again, jockey-trainer combination hitting at about a 20% rate. So always something you like to see. An 8-1 on the morning line, so a little bit of a shot there. The number 6, Relish the Ride, another one that I think makes a lot of sense. 3 for 5 in the money, or in 3 for 5 in the exacta, I should say, at this distance. 5 wins over the Thistledown surface, which is something that I think is important to make note of. And just one last time out, which granted was 5.5 furlongs, but you go back and look at this horse and when it ran at a mile 70 and a mile and a 16th, it's got some nice races. More importantly, it's a horse that tends to do better the longer it runs. This will be third back in the form cycle. I think you'll see its best effort. And then, like I said, Big Truck for Larry Smith makes a lot of sense. This is a horse that just really turns in consistently honest efforts. Career 18 for 26 in the money, or in the exacta, I should say. At the distance, 3 wins, 5 for 9 in the exacta, 7 for 9 in the money. Has not had a lot of success at Thistledown, which is maybe one of the causes for concern, but I'm going to go 5, 6, 8 in this one. So, Spencer, interested in how you went in this one.
Well, I want to talk about the first horse that you kind of talked about in that Mobile Solution, the one that won this race last year. Went with a 58 buyer. So, guys, we're not looking to reinvent the wheel here. 58 buyer with a perfect trip with fast fractions. I gave you a ticket which was too deep using the 8, and really that was more of like a B as like a saver. I think I'm actually gonna switch it back, and I know you got to fix the stuff later on, but I'll just say Relish the Ride for me. I think it would be the single in here.
Yeah.
If you really want to try to narrow down a ticket, Relish the Ride for me. I just wrote good class. I mean, if you look at this horse, has allowance races, has some stakes races, but 59, 62, we know what this one's going to ride. Has some old back races of 70s that, I mean, listen, if the winner's running a 58 and this one's running 70s, the main reason for me to pick this one is we always hear the expression horse for course. And I think that a lot of times it's used incorrectly. A horse for course for me is exactly what this one is. 6 lifetime wins, 5 at Thistle. Not only 5 for 9, so it has a better than 50% win chance, and also has 1 second. So 6 for 9 in the exacta, but 5 wins and 6 lifetime starts. You always see people, like, oh, a horse has won 3 times, so it's a horse for course. Well, it has 17 wins lifetime.
Right.
So this one really, for me, that's more of a horse that just takes its kind of best ride or best race with it, 2 separate tracks. I think in this race, I'm kind of, I'm going a little bit deeper in the last 2 legs. I kind of know where I want to be in the Ohio Derby. I think the 6 for me here is going to be a single.
I like it. No, I think that 6 makes a ton of sense in this race, and you're going to get a little bit more of a price, 5-1 on the morning line. Feels like a very good betting race too. I mean, you mentioned about being able to find that horse that you can maybe bet just a straight win bet on and make up the money of the ticket. And this certainly feels like one of those types of horses that you can do that and get a pretty honest price. 10 horse field. The favorite, I don't think, is going to be going off at a super low price, but I think all these horses are going to be taking around the same amount of money. And so I think the morning line is going to be pretty reflective of what you're going to be getting come post time.
And I will say this with Big Truck too, just for people like again, I'm in the Red Board Rewind model of it. Whereas if you look at the horse's past performances, it's been the favorite 5 times in a row. It's only won twice. You're not going to make your money back at 2-1 betting horses like this. So listen, if Big Truck goes ahead and wins, cool, I'm out of the ticket. But I'd much rather run second with a horse like Relish the Ride at 5-1 than bet Big Truck at 4-5, and he finally wins as the favorite. It's kind of a shame on me for picking him. He's already lost, 3 of 5 as a favorite. I'm gonna try and avoid this one.
Yep. It's always a good angle to use in terms of looking at how they've run coming off as favorites and whether or not you want to take that chance. Some horses run really well at favorites because a lot of times it may be class drops or things like that, but definitely something to pay attention to. I think of a horse that is obviously a much bigger name than this, but a horse like Charge It, is a horse that goes off as favorites quite regularly and doesn't really come through. So there's always those types of horses you got to watch out for. Let's move to what is, I think, an excellent race and a very intriguing one, which is the Lady Jacqueline Stakes, going 1 1/8 miles for 3-year-old nut fillies and mares. And this is a 12-horse field, and this features some really big names in the division like Interstate Daydream, La Vida, and even Misty Vale and 63 Caliber. Spencer, I don't know about you, but when I looked at this one, I saw a lot of speed. And that was something that kind of dictated the way I ended up approaching this from creating my ticket. But interested, how did you see this one play out?
So I realized when I did my first rough draft of going through the race, and I do multiple drafts, I circled 6, and I'm like, well, that's not going to work in this race because I somehow have to get it down to a reasonable amount. I think 63 Caliber here is super, super interesting. Has some very, very good just back class of graded stake races. And when I see that, and this is more of just a class angle for me, when horses ship in to the quote unquote B or C level tier tracks, but they have good back form like this against graded stakes competition, they should be pretty good here. Now, yes, there is others that have shipped in. La Vida, another one, but this one, you said there's a lot of pace, and this one's been showing blue fractions, but closing quite well. So this is another one that I wanted to include on my ticket because for a lot of people, this is the old Jonathan Kitchen special. If you see blue fractions and they're closing, these ones are usually better bets next time out. The last one I do want to use is also Secret Fix. Kim Poole, 41%. That's a really good winning percentage. Anyone that doesn't know, and this horse is 8-1 on the morning line. So going through old books and stuff. If you can find horses that are with winning connections, jockey trainer combos, sometimes the math should just work out. If this guy wins 4 out of 10 races, and this morning line, let's even say they cut it down a little bit. You could still be positive at 5-1. So for me, this is another one that I do want to include. And it's not like this one doesn't have bad races. You talk about so much speed in the race. This one just gutted it out in a gutsy performance and won by 11. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was only an N1X allowance, but it's kind of the war of two worlds here. We have a blue horse fraction that, closed well. We also have a red hot pace up front, and this one blew the field out.
Yeah.
For me here, 41%, you put horses in winning spots, winning percentages. Secret fix for me, 694 in that order.
I like it. And listen, the 9 is a horse I took a real long look at. He's just on the outside of my ticket looking in. What I will say about this horse is this is one where I am going to be paying very close attention to how the track is playing throughout the day. Yeah. And Secret Fix may very well end up being on my ticket if I see that front end speed is holding up particularly well, because that horse should be the speed of the speed, actually. And so if that's the case, and if you start seeing front end speed holding up, then based upon, you're absolutely right, that last effort, which was really the first time this horse ever went long, and it just blew the barn doors off the competition, winning by 11 lengths. So this horse clearly likes going a little bit longer, and if it's able to get out and get loose or just not all that contested in the lead, then I think it could be a horse that absolutely takes them gate to wire. I'm obviously going to be fading Interstate Daydream in this spot. This is a horse that I just feel like needs the exact right setup. It reminds me of a horse we talked about a little bit earlier. This is, Interstate Daydream just is not a horse that really passes other horses a lot of times, kind of needs to sit first or second. And I mentioned how much speed there is in this race, and there's a lot of horses that are faster than Interstate Daydream in this race. And I just don't think she's going to get the right setup. And if she's sitting 4th or 5th, then historically what happens is she finishes 4th or 5th. Like, she kind of, where she runs is where she finishes a lot of times. And so I just, at 7-2 and a short price, and it's a Brad Cox horse, so it's going to get bet down beyond that. I just don't have any interest in using Interstate Daydream. So you mentioned one of the horses that I will be using in this one, and that's La Vida. You mentioned the slow fractions, being able to close into those. There's going to be a hotter pace, I think, in this race. I think you're looking at the 10 is going to be setting, going out pretty fast. The 9 is going to be going out pretty fast. You have a few other horses that are going to be pressing the pace early. And I think La Vida is going to absolutely love that. She can sit back and then make that one big move. And I actually think the 1 1/8 is going to be absolutely perfect for her. You mentioned closing into things last time at the DuPont at Pimlico. That was a race with, not a lot of pace. Interstate Daydream was able to kind of set things up front. That's not going to be the case on Saturday. So definitely like this horse a lot. And this is a horse that's won over this 1 1/8 distance. Granted, it was in Chile, but still, this is a really nice horse that's come up. And I really like this barn. This is the same barn that, of course, trains the turf horse Didia, who's done really, really great things here in the United States recently as well. So Ignacio Correas IV with Chaminade up there on the mount. Definitely like that one. I'm also going to be including the 5 Misty Vale at 4-1. I think, again, this is a little bit more of just a pace setup situation. This horse might sit a little bit closer than La Vida, but I think will be able to, again, put in that kick at the end and be able to close into a little bit of a pace. 3 for 5 in the exacta at the distance with a victory. The horse does like to finish second, maybe a little bit more than I would like to see, but that's going to be the one. And then the final one is 63 Caliber, who I think sits the perfect trip in this race. And I think this is a horse that can sit. It's kind of the antithesis of Interstate Daydream in that she can sit 3rd, 4th, 5th, and that's kind of the ideal trip for her. And then she can go from there. And I think she can take advantage of all the speed that's going to be in front of her, and her late pace speed figures are still very, very strong. So I like her a lot. My only concern about maybe not going skinnier in this one, or maybe even potentially singling her, was just the concern of that huge last effort last time out, and whether or not there's any sort of bounce from that, and whether she can stack up 2 big races. But she looks really tough in this spot. So I definitely like this one. And similar to you, when you see all those grade 1s and grade 2s and grade 3s coming in, she's going to be formidable in this spot.
I think so too. And just like how I mentioned before, like sometimes I just like to mark where I think a horse will be on the buyer figure scale. Interstate Daydream to me is just that low 9 type of figure. Mm-hmm. And I think there's 4 or 5 other horses that can run that figure. So I mean, if you think it's going to be that close to the wire, I don't care if I have a head bob with a, what could be a 5-2 shot. Like, I would much rather have it with 8 and 10-1 shots in there. Yep. And maybe I can get lucky one time. Misty Vale for me was, like you had said, right, just barely off my ticket. But something that you did bring up before, and we talked about, everyone bias. Everyone loves the word bias. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And something that I've learned in my lifetime is I would watch the first 3 races. They would all be speed favoring wins. And I'd be like, oh my God, there's a bias. And then I'd lose the rest of my bankroll the rest of the day because I was stupid and didn't realize it was Todd Pletcher at 4-5, Chad at 4-5, and like someone else. And I'm like, oh, I guess it makes sense they're going to win because they're all huge favorites. And a lot of times people will say, like, well, how can you watch bias if it's just those horses are winning? Watch behind them.
Yeah.
If you see a 25-1 shot that has never even seen a podium finish, all of a sudden streak up the inside, make a note. Inside question mark. Because not only does that help you as a note for later for that horse for the next race, oh my God, there's Lone Speed on the rail in the race upcoming, and this one's 25-1.
Yep.
Well, if that horse can run like that, maybe this one with the rail helping, well, they've never gotten a lead before. Well, today they're Lone Speed and they have the rail. Bias to me in the way a lot of horses win and lose is it's overvalued, but if you find the right sequence where you're right on 2 or 3, and everyone else is on the opposite side, that's where you cash money.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. It's funny. I was just talking with Chase Sessions about this on his podcast in terms of talking about bias as it relates to off-track conditions sometimes. And again, it was about what do you expect to have happen versus what is surprising to you based upon those first few races. And you're right. When it's like, oh, well, a 4-5 horse won. Well, of course they did. Like, that's not surprising. That's not going to make me alter what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. It is when that 25-1 shoots up and it hits third, hits second, and you go, huh, that's interesting. And then maybe it happens in the next race again, and you go, okay, I need to start adjusting for things, because even if it's just vertically, you start making adjustments for exactas and trifectas and things like that. You start taking that stuff into account. So totally agreed. Let's move on to the final race, because I believe there has been enough agreement between the two of us, and I know we are going to have deep disagreement in this final race. And so let's go to the Grade 3 Ohio Derby, going 1 1/8 for 3-year-olds. And this is a race that's come up, I think, very strong. 8-horse field. Bishop's Bay, a horse that ran second to Arcangelo. You have horses like Lord Miles, who were, slated to run in the Kentucky Derby. Hayes Strike, who's running a lot of big races as a 2- and 3-year-old. Henry Q, who's running a lot of Derby prep races. And then you have 2 Phils, who, of course, finished second in that Kentucky Derby. So ultimately, this is where I said at the beginning, I don't search out a single, but this is where my love of 2 Phils, who was my ace in the Kentucky Derby, that was my guy. That was my play from weeks, if not months before the Derby. That was the horse I had identified that I loved in the Derby, and he ran his heart out that day. I think that you have the 7-week layoff now. He should be well rested. He's turning in bullet 5 furlong works at Hawthorne. It seems like he's okay. It seems like that second place effort hasn't taken too much off of him. I think he sits the perfect trip in this race behind Bishop's Bay and Henry Q. And I think maybe those two go at each other a little bit up front. And so I'm going to just single the 4 here, 2 Phils, but I know you have a slightly different opinion on this one.
And listen, this is where my stupidity will come out when 2 Phils wins by 7, but prove it to me one more time, my man. Prove it to me one more time. I've never been a fan of horses coming out of the synthetic races going into the Derby. This time, it's the first time we've actually seen someone jump ahead and do well. And it's something we talked about on my show. I don't know how, everyone says, oh, this crop isn't so strong. I think this crop is right where it needs to be. It's just everyone's going to trade wins back and forth.
Yeah.
And for me, the 105 buyer, yes, Mage ran well, Angel of Empire. If he runs 100, he wins the race, but he's got to prove it to me one more time. And at 8-5, I feel like, especially at, again, the lower tracks, everyone sees, oh my God, Kentucky Derby. And it's even more than it is at Naira, because everyone's seeing grade ones. They're like, oh my God, it's the Queen is walking by us here. This horse was second in the Kentucky Derby.
Yeah.
Bishop's Bay for me is kind of the opposite plays, where I did not like Arcangelo at all in the Belmont. That horse won. This horse just barely lost that one. I have to include in this race. I do not like the fact this one's coming out of these slow-paced races, because usually at that point, if it's anyone even goes close to the lead, they usually back up. This one, though, at 3-1 compared to 8-5. If I think 2 Phils is going to take so much money, maybe Bishop's Bay stays at 7-2, 3-1. That's I'll take that little shot. But my top pick in this race is going to be Lord Miles coming off the layoff. Safi Joseph, listen, it's never good when you see horses win and then they go into the barn. It's why would you ever keep a hot horse in the barn? I just like that last race. I feel that if you see all of these races where 70s and 60s, then bang, 93, and everyone goes, well, where'd that race come from? 3-year-olds, all of a sudden, it could be month 5, 6, 7, 8, they explode. And then everyone goes like, oh, well, that's the outlier race. Here's going to go back to normal. The thing about 2-year-old and 3-year-old racing is once they explode, it's going to happen again. And I think everyone always forgets one of my favorite angles is 2-year-olds that we know are probably Derby Trail eligible or want to go there. They break their maiden and then they're gone. Everyone goes, where'd this horse go? And it shows up in February and people forget and they're like, oh, it's a 12-month layoff. They're going to wait a race and it wins by 7. And you're like, okay, well, now I've missed out on all my money to get a chance on this horse.
Right.
Because those are the horses that end up in the, fountain of youth later on, etc.
Yeah.
Lord Miles to me, if this one can improve again off that 93, and I think 2 fills is not as good as a 105, they're going to be neck and neck. I'll pick 7-2 against, even money.
The thing about Lord Miles is obviously did not go into the barn because of any sort of injury or issue. It was, obviously everything around Safi Joseph at Churchill Downs, and the horse was kind of forced into that situation. So the horse has had regular works and regular habits. I mean, it's had to be moved around a little bit, but otherwise has been fine. So, and the other thing that I'll point out about Lord Miles, and I'm not going to try to say that I was smart enough to pick him in the Wood Memorial at a huge price. That's my friend Andrew Champagne, who keeps reminding everybody that he had Lord Miles in that race. I love Andrew for that. But the thing that was important to note was Lord Miles had the inside post in the previous 2 races before the Wood and just did not get off very cleanly and just had terrible trips, quite frankly. When you go back and look at those 2 races, they're just uncomfortable trips for a young horse, and suddenly escaped from the inside rail. And you saw what happened in the Wood Memorial and took a big step forward. And so, I remember looking back, kind of doing what you did, looking back at my notes after the Wood Memorial. And in my notes, I said, stuck on rail last 2 times out, has a right to improve. Yeah. And you saw that, big right to improve. I wish I had seen it a little bit more clearly, but it was still there. So I get it. I think when I did the preview of this race, I said, listen, either you're going to single 2 fills and you're going to say, this is the guy, and he is this 101, 103 kind of buyer speed figure horse, or you got to play against. You can't include him and some other horses on your ticket. You're either with him or you're against him, and that is pretty clean cut. I'm with him, you're against him, but I think both of them make sense. I think both approaches make sense in that regard. So ultimately, here's our pick 4 tickets. And now, Spencer, I know you kind of made a little bit of an edit with singling that 6 in the second leg, so that's going to change the cost of the ticket. Now, just to let people know, it is a 50-cent pick 4. Now, I calculated this based upon $1. Okay, so if you just want to pay for the base 50 cent, just cut it in half, basically. But I'm going to go 3, 4, 5 in the first leg, 5, 6, 8 in the second leg, 4, 5, 6 in the third leg, and single the 4 in the last for a cost of 27. Spencer's going to go 2, 3, 5 over the 6, over the 4, 6, 9, over the 3, 7. Okay, and I'm trying to do very quick math in my head, and that is going to be $9, $18 if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yep.
So so there you go. So both, I think, pretty affordable tickets. We both have horses that are 5, 6, 8 to 1 within these tickets. So if you hit 1 or 2 of those, you're going to more than make up your money in this sort of a deal, especially with it being $1 base rather than the 50 cents. So that's a little bit of what we're going to be trying to play on Saturday at Thistledown. And Spencer, again, thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter and everything that you got coming up.
So I am at handy_capper. I do a bunch of stuff over in the Money Media right now, mostly just the show. Looking forward to Saratoga season, man. I'm trying to, I tried to level out the way I was doing episodes to try and make 200 at Saratoga, trying to find a really special guest for that. Stay tuned for announcements with that. But yeah, man, I love coming on the show. I love just talking, breaking down tickets. Sometimes I guest host for Pete, and it's nice to, instead of trying to find 3 races where mistakes were made or where somebody had a really bright idea, it's like, let's just break down let's break down a card, man. Love that type of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is a lot of fun. Definitely want to have you back in the near future. And so make sure to check everything out that Spencer has. And thank you so much for watching, everyone out there. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button. Really appreciate all of the support here on Trust the Profits. Until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis, wishing you a great and profitable day at the races and reminding you that it's now post time.